You're actually the very first person from LinkedIn on this podcast. And obviously, I owe a lot to LinkedIn.
It's important not to overthink and
Right.
not to over engineer that content and those moments. B2B marketing can be engaging. It can be emotional. It
Yes.
can be fun. It can where else can you can you basically go viral with content about doing your expenses?
Is there anything you can share in terms of like anything that's on the horizon for what's next? All right, I'm here with Alex Josephson, the VP of Brand and Content Strategy for Advertisers at LinkedIn. I don't think anyone listening to this podcast needs an intro to LinkedIn, but I just looked it up one more time.
Ha,
To me, LinkedIn is like the B2B professional social network. That's how I think about it. I'll share some stats and you'll correct me, Alex, if I'm getting any of these wrong. My research says that LinkedIn now has over 1 billion users. 23.6% of users open the app daily, which was a crazy stat when I read that. 49 million people search for jobs weekly on LinkedIn. Over 100 million messages are sent daily on LinkedIn. Those are just a couple stats. Before joining LinkedIn in 2025, Alex was at Twitter for over 12 years. Last VP Global Head of Brand Strategy and Creative for Advertisers, where he built and led the brand strategy and creative tech division globally for Fortune 500 advertisers. I'm assuming that's basically your role at LinkedIn now, more or less. That's the intro. Alex, thank you so much for joining, and let me know if
appreciate it.
anything to be corrected or amended there in the intro.
No, thank you for having me, Finn. And yeah, clearly you've done your homework. So I would just say the artist formerly known as Twitter might be
Right,
one
yes.
one correction I would put there,
I
but
feel like
we won't
still
go there.
everyone
Yeah,
calls it Twitter X. Like everyone, like no one has yet, I feel like
yeah. The
fully
power of
agreed on the
brand
X.
equity. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
thanks for
yeah.
having me on. Excited to talk about LinkedIn.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And I mean, one of the big reason why I wanted to have on, you're actually the very first person from LinkedIn on this podcast. And obviously I owe a lot to LinkedIn. It changed my life. And, this is the podcast. I had guests on who are very big on LinkedIn. Henry Schuck, Irina Novoselsky, CEO at Hootsuite, Gal Aga, lots of people who are really leveraging LinkedIn to grow their business. But I never really talked to someone at LinkedIn, and I felt like you are the perfect person to speak to creative content, advertising, which is exactly what this show is all about. So first question, can we dive a little bit into vertical video? I mean, obviously I see LinkedIn is really pushing it. You're running all these thought leader ads from LinkedIn through LinkedIn executives. I think when you guys were at Cannes, that was like the kind of agenda, like, hey, vertical video, vertical video, vertical video. Why?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to realize you know, LinkedIn didn't just wake up and say, "Hey, let's get into the vertical video game," right? Like it's everything you see on the platform in terms of product, feature, functionality. It's really driven by our members' behaviors, and so it's important to note that like if you on LinkedIn today, roughly like 2 out of every 3 business decision makers are actually under the age of 45,
Mm-hmm.
and so this is a generation where communicating publicly on the internet across social increasingly vis-a-vis video is just inherent to like their entire like our entire upbringing on the internet and on the web. And so as
Yeah.
you see members people on LinkedIn using video more and more to create content, to share information, to consume information, actually like at a rate that's like 1.6 higher than non-video format. So that is just like the direction that our audience, that our members are moving in. Is of course from a product development standpoint, we're going to do things to enable and to feed the behavior that we're seeing drive engagement. And so whether that was studio polished video, you were seeing more cinema verite, sort of face to cam, face to phone,
Mm-hmm.
sort of more
Selfies.
authentic videos. Exactly. Vertical video is just like the inevitable evolution of video on LinkedIn, which is probably just consistent with platform behavior and functionality across the internet. What's interesting though is while yes, you can make the argument that millennial and Gen Z members drove that rise in video creation and consumption, you're now seeing it adopted across the spectrum of members on LinkedIn. So whether that's high profile executives like
Mm-hmm.
Jamie Dimon, or if you watch like a recent Simon Sinek, Mel Robbins podcast interview. Neither of them would
Mm,
claim to be, from the millennial or Gen Z demographic, but it's a full screen vertical video, graphic oriented, fast, high paced edited piece of content. When Bloomberg News publishes a story on the price of gold, they're leveraging that vertical video format as well.
yeah.
And as our businesses, as our businesses as well, when you look at their latest brand campaigns on the platform. So it's really just an evolution of like that organic behavior that we've been seeing.
I'm going to say this at the risk of, you regretting coming on the show, but I personally have a love-hate relationship with vertical video on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm I guess a creator myself. I post very regularly,
completely.
and
Yeah.
on desktop when I post a vertical video, it's kind of like has these like black bars on the side
Mm.
because it's
Hmm.
like sized differently, and then I'm so used to like seeing the hook, the first sentence of a text post before the video, but on mobile I see it's like kind of embedded underneath the video, so it's kind of hidden. And I think a lot of people, when they're on mobile watching a vertical video, they don't even realize that there's a whole text post still attached to it that they can kind of click on and zoom out and read
Yeah.
that. So I'm still like figuring it out.
Yeah, I think you'll see, we're always just testing different ways to optimize how any format appears across devices, video included. And so you'll continue to see that test and learn evolve based on what's resonating, what's driving engagement. And you'll see variations of this as we just continue to refine like the video viewing experience on the platform at large. Of course, like when I see vertical video and you see the text preview in the post, I think vertical video is such an immersive format. I think of the text as really like a punctuation, whereas really you want
Mm,
to try to get your story, your message across vis-a-vis the video asset itself. And so you can click to expand that text and read the full post, but unlike sort of like a landscape video or an image-based post or a text-based post where the post copy really plays more of a hero role, with vertical video it's more of like a supporting cast role or a punctuation or an accomplice, uh, if you will. And so it's really important just to focus on what's in the safe zone of that
totally.
screen: closed caption, graphic punctuations, emojis, statistics, etc. And very often, to your point, in the point of like thought leadership content or thought leader ads, oftentimes it's a person who's
Yeah.
talking face to camera. And so it's, really the goal is for the audience to hear and see that message from that person versus getting lost in the context of the text.
I might be one of the few people who's actually sad about LinkedIn stories never having made it. That was before you joined LinkedIn. I don't know. That must have been like
That's
2020 or something like that. And I
before my
loved it.
time.
And then they killed it, I think, 6 months
Yeah,
later.
I think that was an era where there was a lot of experimentation happening in the space, and you saw certain platforms mimic the stories feature, and in some cases it made sense, in some cases it didn't. I think we take a very member first approach, which is in
Yeah.
terms of anything we're putting on the platform, how is it landing with our members? How is it driving engagement? I think I saw a meme at one point during that time where it was like Excel had stories. It's like
Oh,
every
God.
it's like so an interesting time of testing and learning.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean what I'm thinking about, and I'm curious to hear your commentary on that. Obviously, we work with a lot of executives, and I think
Hmm.
about the people on LinkedIn, there's like two buckets. There's kind of the creator, and then there's the executive turned creator in a sense, right? And I would say the creator, the people doing this full time, probably myself included in that group, vertical video comes very natural. But for an executive who is maybe in their 50s and they work at a big company and they've never created content in their lives, probably, at least from what we see, the way to get them into this is text. And then they would probably never be this very natural on camera, super engaging type person. So I wonder whether it pushes a little bit into the like, hey, you got to be this creator on camera, captions, things going on the screen, where just the executive that's, as I said, in their 50s, never created content, could be left behind a little bit.
I think it's important, whether it's you as an executive or it's a business looking at, hey, who are the executives and the employees and leaders within the company who would make sense to
Yeah.
feature, through
Yep.
this type of. It's just important to know who you're working with, and different people have different styles and that, in terms of how they communicate, in terms of their voice on a platform like LinkedIn, and that would translate as well to how they show up on camera or, in those environments. But I actually think, it's important not to overthink and
Right.
not to over engineer that content and those moments. One of my favorite examples is John Gray,
Yeah.
who's the president of Blackstone.
Hmm.
He has just really flourished on the platform by posting authentic content, leverages vertical video heavily. But actually, if you look at like the two sort of like micro content series that drive his content strategy, one is really simple. When Blackstone has an earnings release, he just sits down in front of his desk,
Yep.
props the phone up. It's very lo-fi, and he just delivers the earnings report in 60 seconds. Super simple. Of course, he's a very charismatic
Yeah.
individual, but he's breaking down an earnings report in 60 seconds. The other one is when he travels the world for Blackstone. He is a big runner. And so he just takes his phone out with him when he goes for a jog. He might bring some Blackstone employees or some colleagues or clients along. He explains to you what he's doing in Beijing or Toronto and how it ties back to the business. And so it's not rocket science, right?
Yeah.
In that regard. And I think ultimately people want to see who the humans are behind the logos of the companies that they're considering doing business with.
Yeah.
And the more vulnerable and authentic you can be while remaining on message for your employer or for your business, I think that those are the ingredients that really matter.
And I mean, just to speak on that example, I mean, I can tell from my own perspective. I've heard of Blackstone obviously before. I never had interactions with the company, but now, I mean, I can't help but just like that brand and them more just from watching
Sure.
John run around doing a selfie video. And it's real. I mean, it's authentic. There's no like, it doesn't. And so, like, probably by the time that I need to make some decision about where I'm going to put my money or investment account or whatever thing it is that they're doing, I mean, Blackstone's going to be top of my list, right? So it works. So now you obviously work with some of the biggest advertisers on LinkedIn, and I was curious, what are some of the suggestions and tips and things that you find yourself most often telling companies and brands as they're scaling on LinkedIn, as they're putting more budget behind their LinkedIn strategy?
Yeah. So there's actually, related to what we were just talking about. There's three principles that I find myself lately really talking a lot about. When I've been here now at the company for, I don't know, about 7 months or so. I've probably done somewhere north of 60 customer meetings. So CMOs, heads of global media, heads of brand, creative, et cetera, their agency partners. And so there's a couple principles that are really top of mind. One, demonstration over communication. So in other words, show versus tell in the feed. I'll give you an example of that. Would be a brand that does a really good example of this is Microsoft Copilot,
Mm-hmm.
where the creative that you'll see, you've probably seen these videos in your feed
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. They actually show the exact use case. Actually, they actually show the exact pain point that Copilot solves and remedies for the customer. So you're sneaking in a jog in between meetings. You get a notification you've got a client meeting in 15 minutes, and you're supposed to run the meeting. It shows how Copilot can basically like read the index of all the information at your company, give you an executive summary on the account, suggest an agenda for a call, and then actually when you hop on the call, you record the call, take notes, suggest a follow-up email, and craft the draft for you. And they accomplish all of that in under 15 seconds. And it's just a really good example of everyone's been there in that moment or some similar moment. It's a good example of showing versus telling. You often hear marketers say, well, okay, in certain industries, the products are invisible, like financial services,
Mm.
but there's opportunities to show versus tell there. And one of my favorite examples is American Express does a really good job of bringing their customers to life
Mm.
in their creative. And just like customer testimonial content, it's authentic. It shows who their customers are, small business owners, investors, et cetera, and really brings their stories to life in the feed in a way that maps back to everything we just talked about a few minutes ago in terms of authentic, human-driven storytelling. So that's like principle number one: demonstration over communication. Second thing we talk about a lot is ABC. Not always be closing, but but always be contextual.
Mm.
And so think about not just what company you're talking to from a B2B marketing standpoint, but who are the specific
Mm.
ICPs and the buyers you're trying to reach, who are your target buyers versus your hidden buyers, and making sure you're showing up with creative and a message that's specific for that audience, versus a sort of like a blanket a blanket messaging approach. The other is like figuring out where's their content, through our publishing partners on LinkedIn, through creators on LinkedIn that is relevant to your business and your audience that you can show up and be adjacent to, and sort of like allow that to really work for your ads and your creative, and let your ads work a little less harder for you, if that makes sense. And the last is really thinking beyond channels, and just like, to everything you said, today in this conversation, like the days of publishing content exclusively from a logo are over. And so it's really critical to humanize your brand and understand that some of the greatest marketing assets and resources you have are actually sitting within the walls of your company, from the executives to the folks who are developing and shaping the products and services that you're pitching in market, to my point earlier, to your customers and your partners as well. So those are kind of 3 guideposts we've been really emphasizing with our advertising partners.
So demonstrate instead of communicate. ABC, always be contextual, and then think beyond channels. I saw one recent cool example. I mean, Ryan sometimes posts these, I think, Copilot videos where he takes like some use case, your CEO.
Yeah.
And I think there was one yesterday or from last week or something. And he talked about, I think, Outlook summarizing emails now. And then Satya commented on that post, and he said something like, "Oh, that's why you've been replying to more of my emails, Ryan." And I think it's just, I mean, I don't know if this was coordinated, but the CEO posting a use case and then the CEO of Microsoft commenting with like some snarky, funny thing, and obviously that comment blew up and had like 500 likes on its own. So it's just,
yeah, it's the magic of the feed, and it's what's possible when you bring people into your message.
Yeah.
Because like Snowflake and AWS do a really good job. They'll take their lead developers, or like their folks who are actually advising like their cloud and data services, and like if you view the content, you would think, hey, actually these look like they might look more like what you would traditionally expect to see on like Instagram or YouTube Shorts or TikTok, but they're actually like some of the most brilliant, product developers and lead engineers in like the cloud computing space.
Right.
And what that tells their audience when they're seeing that content is like, oh, I have the chance to engage with the person who's actually shaping the product that I use.
Right.
And so that just creates this kind of like irreplaceable sort of like knowledge network where like moments like that are possible.
And you can, I mean, those 3 principles, like you can combine them. Like what comes to mind, we're working with one company, they sell a carbon life cycle software. And their buying committee consists mainly of the head of sustainability, head of compliance, and CFO at large automotive companies. And so we're working with 3 different people at that company, internal subject matter experts, one on the sustainability stuff, one on the compliance stuff, and then the CEO who can speak more to that CFO persona. And each of them share expertise and then use cases. And then with thought leader ads, obviously we can get very granular to make sure that this person gets shown to that head of sustainability persona at these target accounts, and then this person gets shown to the head of compliance. So it's an awesome way to combine LinkedIn's capabilities.
Yeah, and it's a great way to get ahead of that inevitable moment in the buying cycle where your target buyer is going to have to convince or persuade the hidden buyer, their peers, or in some cases their superiors, to get on board with that, with choosing your company as the solution. And so getting ahead of that moment, we see brands doing that more and more because of the success of thought leader specific content, thought leader ads in the feed, and B, just the sort of like the unparalleled precision of targeting with LinkedIn ads, where you can reach not just, oh, I know this person works at this company, I know their exact title, their exact role, and their exact peer-to-peer network, and how to sort of slice and dice and tailor my messaging to those constituents in an engaging way.
Can you expand on that a little bit more? Just because I still hear people saying LinkedIn ads are expensive, and I think it plays into this idea.
Well, so there are plenty of places for marketers to find cheap reach. And on LinkedIn, we can tell you with extremely high confidence who you're reaching. And what, not just what industry are they in, what company do they work at, what is the size of that company, what is their exact title, where in the world or the country are they located. And so when you're reaching your target buyer, right, whether that's like through sponsored content in the feed with a piece of video creative or another ad format, you're not only able to drive those top of funnel objectives like reach awareness, engagement and awareness, but then within the same ecosystem, you have the ability to nurture that connection down funnel in terms of driving consideration, driving conversion, ultimately getting them to take some type of action in terms of whether it's a visit or a lead or an acquisition or whatever that might be. So really, it's really a matter of if you really value reaching an audience that is the audience you need to reach, and will provide that value down funnel in terms of your pipeline, versus reaching an audience where you're not quite sure who those leads are, who those impressions are reaching, and who those leads actually are. And that's more of like I would say like a short-term view where you can sort of like hand over buckets of impressions or leads, but not really have high confidence if those are the right eyeballs to be reaching or the right leads to be collecting and generating.
Yeah. Now, besides those three principles, are there any patterns that you see in terms of specific formats or objectives, or video ads run through the company account in the retargeting layer? I don't know. You can get as granular or tactical as you want here, but any specific ad format that works particularly well right now?
Yeah, sure. So generally speaking, video ads are seeing like a 3x engagement versus non or static ad format.
Yep.
So by and large, like that's where we're seeing outsized engagement in the feed first and foremost. Finn, you mentioned thought leader ads quite a bit, and so when you compare those to sort of the same static sort of standard ads, we see like a 2x lift in engagement for thought leader ads. Where it gets interesting is we start to combine some of those upper funnel formats with lower funnel KPIs, sort of orchestrate brand and demand. So if you're familiar with our brand link platform, so this is where advertisers have the ability to run pre-roll in front of premium content from premium publishers. So think of the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg and Fast Company and the like. And what we're seeing there is actually you're able to not just select the publisher that your ad is running in front of, you're able to select the exact clip. So if you're running an ad for an agentic service, you're running it in front of a segment, let's say from Fortune magazine, interviewing Jeffrey Katzenberg on how AI is impacting the entertainment industry. And so because it's so hyper contextual, we're seeing completion rates for those brand link pre-roll ads that are in the neighborhood of like 28% higher than what you'd see in the traditional feed, because you're targeting that experience to the exact audience and member and buyer that you want to reach. What's interesting is when members are exposed to those brand link pre-roll ads, they're 18% more likely to convert to a lead when they're retargeted down the funnel with a lead generation format. And similarly, so like our CTV ads platform has really been seeing quite a bit of success over the last year and change since it's been available in North America, where you have the ability to actually, the same members you're targeting on LinkedIn, you're able to reach them and target them with precision when they're off platform. And so when they're streaming their favorite shows, movies, news or sports content, the likes of Paramount Plus, Hulu, Peacock, CNN, Bloomberg News, etc., you're able to take like LinkedIn's B2B precision targeting and present your on the big screen, sound on, captive environment, run your equity spot there, and then retarget those folks back down the funnel
for the retarget
on LinkedIn. Yeah.
For the retargeting, anything specific you see there in terms of formats that work really well to then capture that demand, as you say?
Yeah. Well, let me just use I'll use two real example where ServiceNow, they're running you've seen their brilliant Idris Elba campaign, right? Put AI to work for people, and they're running that spot in front of AI specific content through brand link publishers, and then they're retargeting people exposed to those ads, members exposed to those ads down the feed with lead gen formats, and they're seeing like a 30% increase in lead gen completion. Similarly, they're running the same play with CTV. So they're running that spot targeting LinkedIn members on streaming platforms and then retargeting them with lead gen formats down the funnel. And they're seeing like a 45% increase in lead gen completion there. So that's typically where we see a lot of success with connected TV and brand link publisher content, where you're running short form video, and then you're retargeting down funnel with lead gen format.
Anything interesting to say about conversation ads? I'm kind of obsessed with them right now, and I think a lot of people are not even aware that they exist.
Yeah, conversation ads provide the ability to really to personalize the message, right, based on who a member is, what they do, and so we do see success similarly when paired with upper funnel, and you sort of like warm the member up, give them exposure to your equity message, and then you're reaching them further down funnel with a conversational ad where they've already been exposed to your brand, your product, and your service, and now you're just continuing that conversation down the funnel and nurturing that conversation further.
Now I'm curious, if you were running paid social for a large B2B tech company, say they're doing 100 million, which is probably below the typical company that you interface with, but I'm just curious how you would even think about like how to build the strategy, what to prioritize, how much to put into brand versus demand in terms of a budget split. If you can run me through like a high level.
Yeah, well, I would start by really segmenting your ICP and understanding who are your target buyers, who are your hidden buyers, and what is the targeting and the creative and the message that maps to those key, primary, secondary, tertiary audience segments. Then I would advise the company to keep in mind LinkedIn is now a video forward platform, and this is what's driving engagement. This is how members are consuming and engaging with content. And so running in-feed and in-feed video campaigns to not just for the sake of reaching video objectives and achieving video KPIs, but to actually identify intent within those audience segments I mentioned and accelerate. We find is like marketers typically will be able to accelerate retargeting pools through video, and that's where you start to put your consideration and your conversion dollars at work. So you're not just showing up cold at the bottom of the funnel with 80 to 90% of your budget in conversion, expecting to see quality lead pipeline generation at scale. You're leveraging video at the top of the funnel to warm that audience, identify who's really worth putting those consideration and conversion dollars to work. And that's where you start to think about document ads and lead gen formats, conversation ads, etc., where you can then move from driving equity and affinity to driving inaction. So start with thinking of your audience, start with video to identify intent. What's really important is your brand and demand teams working in orchestration with each other, so you can so that those brand investments and those lower funnel investments are coordinated, and they're not sort of they're operating more as a siphon versus in silos, if that makes sense. And then the two other areas immediately to consider are: one, humanizing your brand, leveraging the employees, the executives, the leaders at your company and your customers. Focus on sort of thought leadership content, thought leader ads. It's proven to be really effective, as we talked about earlier, really effective mid-funnel consideration-oriented content that can help you thread that customer journey from awareness to consideration to conversion. And then lastly, we see on the platform every week, you'll see over 20,000 new events published by businesses or promoted by businesses. And so those events are really important. 20 to 30% of your marketing budget on average in B2B is probably going to events for a company this size. And so that's an opportunity to really take advantage of the entire ecosystem on LinkedIn, from driving awareness that the event is happening, collecting registration, whether it's to attend the event in person, to attend it virtually. You get a push notification when the event broadcast is about to happen, drops you directly into the live stream of the event, into the LinkedIn feed. And what you're doing here is you're again driving all this intent around an event, and then you're able to retarget all those event viewers and those event attendees to drive different actions coming out of the event further down the funnel.
Map your different personas and figure out what different messages you need to speak to for each of those different personas. Leverage video, because that's what's really driving engagement right now, and build your retargeting audience. then use that to figure out intent, which means you then retarget with conversation ad, lead gen forms, document ads, leverage the people at your company, internal subject matter experts, executives, as well as your customers to create content, and then leverage events. A couple follow-up questions to get a little bit
please.
more. Would you run ads, let's say thought leader ads, towards thought leadership content, in the sense of, like, let's say there's an executive at the company and they don't post a use case like the video that we discussed that Ryan posted about Outlook, but it's really just like industry commentary. Here's what's happening in our industry. It's really like broad insight. Would you run any ads towards that to build a retargeting audience, or more towards this like use case, here's our product, here's the pain point we actually solve type content?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're selling. Truthfully, I think that sort of higher level industry perspective is really healthy, always on content. And I think I would consider that as like sort of evergreen content throughout the course of the year. Where I would really consider, putting the promotion behind are those moments where the executive is really zeroing in on a particular product or service, for a particular audience, or if they are providing that industry perspective at an event or a milestone that's very, very relevant to the company's overall kind of marketing calendar or marketing program.
Makes sense. Now, I've seen some talk about, people saying that LinkedIn's reach went down, and that must be because of the thought leader ads format. Can you confirm or disconfirm the theory that LinkedIn reduced people's reach so that they spend more on thought leader ads?
Well, we take a member first approach to first and foremost. And I think like you'll see fluctuations in organic reach as we continue to update how like different types of content are distributed on the platform, but that's not by design. Actually, specific to thought leader ads, oftentimes where you see brands putting paid media behind that content is because they're seeing strong organic performance. And so oftentimes there will be an organic post from an executive or an employee or a leader at the company that drives outsized organic engagement, and that's a signal to the paid social team or the paid media team to actually boost and promote that content. So the organic performance often is a strong signal that triggers the paid promotions. So that's certainly nothing by design there by any means. Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Sorry if I can set the record straight there.
Love it. Now, within our own customers, which are much smaller companies than what you work with, but I've had multiple conversations of heads of marketing telling me that they want to reallocate quite a large chunk of their Google ad budget to LinkedIn ads. Is that something you see too? Can you comment on that trend?
I wouldn't be able to comment on like investment on other platforms by any means. In the world that we're living in now, these are not normal times, right, for marketers, and so you are seeing a shift. Like generally, like there's just a shift in traditionally SEO or search engine optimization to like AEO, like answer engine optimization, and we're like moving towards this zero-click world, right, where LLMs are providing information is more accessible online than ever before. And so anyone and everyone can now access that information. What's becoming increasingly valuable is what you'd like consider to be like network knowledge, or like active language information that's being shared in real time by real people, and particularly authentic people who are who they say they are,
right,
in terms of their online identity. And so I think, as you see sort of traditional search and publisher content, displacement, these sort of peer networks are going to flourish. And so I think LinkedIn is just really well positioned for the times that we're in, where business, people are going to continue to seek out authentic real-time information from people who they know and trust,
right,
in terms of identity and authenticity.
Plus, I gotta say, you guys have been at work. I feel like LinkedIn has really been shipping stuff both in the ad manager and on the kind of
creator side, where I feel like every couple of weeks there's like a new feature. I think now there's partnerships in the ad manager where brands can discover posts by people that mention their company and directly in the platform request to promote that.
Yeah, that's I would think of it more as like thought leader ad discovery,
Yes.
where like and we're testing that with like a small group of customers now, but I would expect that to be more widely available in the near future. Where if there's that's one of the very unique aspects of the platform, where there are people coming to this platform every day talking about the companies they work with, the brands they engage with, the products and services they use. They're sharing expert information. People are seeking advice. They're looking for recommendations. And certainly that creates a lot of opportunity for brands to endorse those messages and that content, and ultimately build relationships with some of their power users and power customers.
Yeah. Now, maybe we already talked about some of them, but do you have any favorite campaigns or ideas that you've seen companies do that kind of impressed you, that stand out to you as great examples of creative advertising?
Yeah, I'll share two actually that come to mind. One, I don't know if you saw this, Finn, just a couple of weeks ago. So you're familiar with the company Ramp,
Yeah.
payments and
Yep.
expenses platform. And so their whole value proposition is paperless expense experience for anyone in like the corporate environment. And
I think I know, yes.
they set up, like, maybe somewhat inspired by like the Glass Cube severance stunt like from last year. So they set up like an office like in the city, in New York City. Sorry, I say the city, but it's in Manhattan. And it was like designed as an office, and they had Brian Baumgarten, who's like maybe more known as Kevin,
Yep.
from the American version of The Office, NBC, and he was the CFO for a day, and for 6 or 7 hours he's just going through this, semi, improv, maybe partially scripted, this sequence of follies where he's trying to do his expenses, and there's papers and there's receipts and there's people coming in, and it's just this sort of like very verite style of content activation, which just shows the pain of trying to do your expenses without a product or a service like Ramp. And they live streamed that experience. They actually ran like end-to-end suite of event solutions that I talked about earlier on LinkedIn, where they're pre-promoting the event, letting people know when it was coming. They were then live streaming the event in the feed on LinkedIn, and then promoting moments and pieces of content from the event in the hours and in days that followed. And I thought that was just a really, B2B marketing can be engaging. It can be emotional.
Yes.
It can be fun. It can where else can you basically go viral with content about doing your expenses? And so I think, they really start with the pain point, and then they show the sort of like humor in that pain point and how it ties back to their value proposition. So that's one. One of my other favorite examples is actually a partnership that we launched this summer with American Express, called Together We Grow, where we identified small business owners on LinkedIn who are also American Express small business card members and customers, and co-created an original content series profiling their journey in building these businesses, how they run these businesses today. And it was a really like authentic way to tell real stories of real people on the platform who are partnering with the business who is also on the platform. So if you haven't seen that, we can send some episodes over.
Yeah.
I think it's best in class. Yeah.
We can link that in the show notes. And I think the Ramp example is, again, a great example of, obviously they did everything right from the company execution point of view. And then there's all this user created content, in a sense, because there's all these, it was literally a glass box in the middle of Manhattan. And so people walk by and were just creating videos and posting them on Instagram and LinkedIn. And then again, with the combined thought leader ads thing, they could then take some of the best people who created this very authentic, real, in the moment, oh my God, I'm here, make a quick video type content, and then amplify that with thought leader ads to make sure that all of the people in their ecosystem see it.
Yeah, exactly. And their CEO is a really, really dynamic individual. And so, and they recorded like an hour-long video with Kevin from The Office and the CEO talking about the entire operation as well. And I think that's just like, to our point earlier, like we probably said multiple times in this conversation today, like how important it is for executives to show up authentic. And I think no better way to do that than the CEO saying like, this is a highly designed activation that they ran. And then they said, like, actually, let's just pull back the curtain and talk to you about, like, how this went down. And I think that's really compelling, and I think other companies should take note.
You would have needed to prompt ChatGPT for a very long time for it to spit out that idea. That's incredible.
Yeah, really
Creativity still, I mean, it still works, right? Like, that's just creative.
It's not, it doesn't just drive your brand. It ultimately is responsible for sales at the end of the day.
Yeah. Now, LinkedIn is obviously pushing hard too on exec content. I mean, you're putting out content. I would say if I had to pick a favorite, it's Dan Shapiro at LinkedIn, just because he's also doing the selfie videos and it feels very kind of, again, authentic, pushing out this content. Any kind of thoughts on that? How important is this organic? I know you work on the advertising side, which ties into organic, but how important is this organic executive thought leadership content, in your opinion, for companies' overall marketing and brand strategy?
Yeah, I think it's critical. As I mentioned earlier, like, people want, they want to hear from and they trust people. They buy people. Even when they're buying products and services, they're buying the people behind those products and services. And so the more that a company can build the muscle memory of having the people who speak on behalf of the company show up on the platforms where their customers are and engage those customers in authentic, vulnerable, honest ways. And increasingly, video is becoming, I think it's inarguably the best medium to do that. And so you can't just wait for a campaign or product launch or conference to start standing your executives up in front of their phones and in front of cameras. You really have to build that in as just the rhythm of how you operate as a business and as a brand. And the more you can empower certain leaders and employees to do that, the more their peers within the company will realize, oh, it's actually quite achievable and quite attainable to do. And that's where we typically see that wildfire catch on. And it really comes down to, are you prioritizing that as a business, and how are you organizing and setting your employees and your teams up to do it successfully? Are you celebrating it, versus scaring people off from participating? And of course, there's parameters that have to be put in place in different companies depending on, compliance is different by industry, and so the playbook might look a little bit different for a bank versus an up and coming, SaaS company, for instance. But as long as our philosophy is like, put those parameters in place and then allow your people and your teams to run, within those parameters, and special things happen.
Besides putting in those parameters and maybe keeping them as lean as possible, anything else that you've seen work for companies to enable and empower people? Who, if a company listens to this and they want to get their CEO, or they want to get their execs, or they want to get their subject matter experts at the company to do this, besides just telling them go do it, anything?
Showing versus telling. Showing is the best way to educate. And so getting your executives to test and learn and putting content out on platform consistently, following those best in class practices, those best practices, that's just the best way to scale.
Yep, makes sense. Now, I was just personally interested. Do you have any favorite people to follow on the platform? You're not allowed to pick anyone working at LinkedIn.
Okay.
Anyone outside of LinkedIn who are
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I won't pick anyone at LinkedIn. Although I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Debunking Shah, who runs the ads marketing for us here. He's a great follow, so I had to sneak that in. I mentioned John Gray at Blackstone. He's one of my favorites. Corporate Natalie, if you've seen her content, really bringing, where personality and professionalism really blur, and finding the humor. We talked about the Ramp example, like finding the humor in otherwise sort of like what we would take for granted as mundane day-to-day corporate life and experiences. She's really, really good at. And so one of my favorites was the I don't know if you saw this, the candidate who was applying for the Pope role and
No, I
didn't
did
get
not
it,
see
and they
that.
received the email from the recruiter explaining to them like why they went in a different direction. It's just
I feel like there's a lot more like LinkedIn native comedy now. Well, like back in the day, a couple of years ago, people would just repost like random viral funny clips that they found on other platforms. But now there's like corporate Natalie, there's a bunch of other, there's like these
yeah,
skits that
Rob
are
Mayhew is a
like,
really good one.
which
Joe
one?
Fenty's another. Rob Mayhew is
Mm-hmm.
another good one. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Fenty. Yeah, I think look, the proliferation of video on the platform, I think, combined with the fact that this is in an audience where, yes, the medium has changed in the LinkedIn feed to be one that is much more video forward, sight, sound, and motion, but the audience and the contents of content on the platform is still holistically completely focused on business and career and
Yep.
industry. And so I think those two things are colliding in what's a really interesting way. And that's what's helping fuel a lot of this sort of like tipping point that we're seeing, or inflection point that we're seeing on LinkedIn in terms of like the B2B creator
Yeah.
movement that's happening. And so yeah, corporate Natalie or Rob Mayhew or are sort of like torchbearers in
Yeah,
that
yeah,
movement, I
yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Um, is there anything you can share in terms of like anything that's on the horizon for what's next, what you guys are focusing on, whether it's in terms of roadmap or any interesting little sneak peeks into what you guys are working on, or I don't know, maybe that's not possible, obviously.
Yeah, well, what I can say, some of the areas I mentioned earlier, with respect to creators, which we were just talking about, we are continuing to evolve the ways in which we make it possible to pair creators with brands.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're sitting on top of a really unique digital representation of the economy. And so we have a really unique opportunity to work with brands and help them find the members and the creators
Mm.
who are engaging the audiences they care about and who are subject matter experts in their specific industries, as nuanced as they may be, whether that's financial services or SaaS technology, and really working to bring them together to co-create content on the platform, fuel new campaigns that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So that's an area where we're continuing to double down on, along with programming. We launched, I mentioned our BrandLink program,
Yep.
where we're continuing to add new premium publishers to that ecosystem of partners. In addition, we launched at our first New Fronts event this year an original slate of original shows featuring top voices on the platform. So Ali
Mm.
K. Miller,
Mm-hmm.
most prominent followed voice in AI, is, the face of the AI in Action show, or Stephen Bartlett with the CEO Playbook,
Mm-hmm.
or Guy Raz with the Founders Blueprint. And so that's an area you can expect to see more from us in terms of increased programming around a wider breadth of topics with some of the most prominent voices on the platform. And that's where advertisers really have the ability to show up and run adjacent to some of the most sought after content from some most sought after faces and voices on LinkedIn. So
Interesting.
those would be two areas to continue to watch.
Yeah, I saw this the other day, like when there was Dreamforce, the Salesforce conference, and I was just thinking it would be kind of interesting, the idea of almost like LinkedIn having the exclusive streaming rights to some of the bigger conference, kind of like how Netflix have certain, exclusive streaming rights for certain shows. And so if you want to access Dreamforce remotely, LinkedIn has the exclusive streaming rights. Anyway, it's very cool what you guys are doing. I feel like there's a lot of momentum and a lot of cool stuff coming out of LinkedIn. So, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. And yeah, I mean, anything that I should have asked that I didn't ask, any remaining last notes here that you want to, leave the audience with?
No, Finn, thank you for having me. And let me just say, I really appreciate watching your story unfold on the platform as we see you build your business and your personal brand. And I think a lot of the best practices that we talked about today on this podcast for businesses and executives and leaders, I think you're following them quite prescriptively. So really just appreciate you as a follow on LinkedIn.
Cool. I'm just learning from the best in the game, including you. So thanks for taking the
You're
time.
too kind. You're too kind. It's great to connect, and thank you for having me.